and I'm a Senior Program Analyst with the National Education Association's ESP Quality Department. And I, along with my colleague Lisa Connor, also a Senior Program Analyst in the ESP Quality Department, will be serving as your moderator for this evening's webinar, Understanding Students with Autism Spectrum Disorder, Share Your Calm, Not the Chaos. At this time, I would like to welcome two of our ESP leaders that will be hosting this session for us this evening, Mickey Brady and Donna Nielsen, and they're here to get us started for tonight.
Good evening and welcome. I am Donna. I have a degree in business management. However, when my children started school, I found my passion was really working with students. I became a special ed assistant on a school bus driver for over 30 years, scratch organized the union for the bus drivers affiliating with NEA, even though our teachers are AFT, and became a certified bus driver trainer, a certified grief support specialist, and served 2 terms on the NEA Board of Directors at large. Mickey?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mickey, and I've been a school bus driver for 28 years, both for general education and special needs students. I'm also a certified school bus driver trainer and the professional development facilitator for our department. I'm CPI certified instructor in nonviolent crisis intervention and an ESP True Colors facilitator.
Mickey and I are both graduates of the ESP Leaders for Tomorrow program and have served as presenters at the National ESP Conference and several state conferences around the United States speaking on autism. We were given the opportunity by our school system to attend training on autism with Hands in Autism, which is affiliated with Indiana University and Riley's Children's Hospital, with a caveat that we came back and provided professional development for our ESP special needs assistants and bus drivers. However, for me, I think the best teacher on autism I have is my grandson, Nate, who is autistic. Tonight is not a clinical study of autism spectrum disorder, but rather a time for us to try and understand our students with autism, what their behaviors are trying to tell us, and ways to teach them. Too often in our profession, we encounter students with autism spectrum disorder and do not always have the training or professional development to know how to help and communicate with them. Perhaps one of the most commonly recognized characteristics of autism is difficulty with communication, at least the way neurotypical people communicate. You or some of your colleagues may have never even spoken with an autistic person before, so it's likely that there will be communication difficulties, at least at first. It may just take some time to adjust for both parties. One of the main symptoms for individuals with autism is an inability to process all the different sensory inputs in their environment. It's like everything from their 5 senses flows through their brain with equal volume and at 100% volume. Life is loud. They hear, see, and sense everything at once. Their auditory abilities are extreme, and sometimes they can even hear you swish your hair. In a space where you are talking and other students are making little noises, is it any wonder a student with autism who sees and hears every sound clearly and at full volume, puts input from all their other senses, shuts down, and can't understand or comprehend what you are saying, like a neurotypical person? Tonight, we will not only talk about autism, but share real-life examples and the words of students with autism describing what it feels like to them. For just a moment, while you are sitting there tonight, open your senses. Don't filter out anything you are feeling, hearing, seeing, smelling, even down to the clothes you are wearing and how they touch your body, and allow it to explode into your brain at full volume. That's some of the feelings of many with autism. A person with autism may flap their arms, rock back and forth, freeze in place, or make other unnatural gestures to cope with the chaos that they are experiencing in their mind, or express that they are happy or confused. These are called stims. Try to view the world from their perspective and gain insights into why they interact with their environment in the unique way in which they do. Most of us can't imagine what it feels like to have this disorder, or what a person with autism must endure trying to navigate through a typical day. The Cherokee tribe of Native Americans had a well-known proverb that states, "You shouldn't judge a person before you have walked a mile in their moccasins." One can see how this type of thinking can lead to greater compassion and understanding of those on the autism spectrum. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Remember this statement when dealing with a person with autism. Each one on this spectrum is uniquely different and has unique needs and abilities. The way you interact with them and they with you must be tailored to each student. Though specific symptoms differ from person to person, there are common challenges present for individuals with autism. There is no cure for autism, but the use of strategies and interventions can help with behaviors, challenges, and symptoms. And
understanding autism spectrum disorder can be difficult and challenging, to say the least. ASD is a broad term which covers several subcategories, such as childhood disintegrative disorder, Rett syndrome, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, autistic disorder, and Asperger syndrome. Today, we will be focusing on the latter two categories that fall under the umbrella that is ASD. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability that affects communication and interactions with others. Also, specific and restricted areas of interest and repetitive behaviors that can negatively affect our students' ability to function properly. Although symptoms will run the gambit from mild to severe and will be different in all individuals, there are some common shared characteristics that interfere with a student's ability to communicate, socialize, behave, and develop properly. The learning, thinking, and problem-solving abilities of those on the spectrum will vary greatly, ranging from extremely gifted to severely.
autism, or autism spectrum disorder, refers to a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. According to the Centers for Disease Control, autism affects an estimated of 1 in every 59 children in the United States. Every education professional in our schools will more than likely encounter students on the autism spectrum. So it is imperative that all educators know and are aware of the challenges which face students with autism and how to best interact with those students, whether you work in a bus, in a classroom, in the halls, in the office, the cafeteria, or anywhere you come into contact with students. We all need to know the information we will present tonight, as every educator is important to every student's success. Autism disorder is more common than diabetes, cancer, Down syndrome, and many others. There's no easy medical test to diagnose ASD, like a blood test or x-rays, and so many children with mild ASD symptoms are not always diagnosed early in childhood. Some not until they're 8 to 10 years old, or even into adulthood. Autism occurs over all cultures and levels of society or economic situations. Boys are approximately 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. We will go into that in general in just a few moments.
Most students on the spectrum will have a hard time carrying on a conversation with other people. But the ones that are nonverbal, they don't speak at all, or they just use a few words, but still have a hard time with the ping pong of conversation. Some autistic kids may also have echolalia, a condition that causes them to repeat words or phrases over and over again. And this can make communicating with them very challenging. I work with a nonverbal student who has echolalia, and he's unable to carry on any kind of significant conversation, and occasionally will just blurt out words and phrases into the air. They're not directed at anybody in particular, and it doesn't seem to matter to him if anyone is listening or not. But one day I recognized the movie he was quoting as The Lion King and said to him, "Lion King, yes?" He became super excited, like I had cracked some kind of secret code, and he was smiling and laughing, clapping his hands, and even hugging me. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is a huge breakthrough, a starting point for some kind of communication with him. Through trial and error, I eventually learned to communicate him by simply asking him a question, followed by yes. Like, do you need happy music? Yes. And if that's what he needed to calm down, he responded, happy music, yes. And if there was no response, that simply meant no. It's now much easier to help him convey his wants and needs effectively, which lessens his meltdowns, and we all know that's a truly beautiful thing. But please keep in mind that nonverbal does not mean non-thinking, non-hearing, non-feeling, or non-understanding. When you hear the term severe or profound autism, think the word extreme. These are the students who are unable to speak, the ones that are unable to care for themselves properly and need assistance in the very basic life skills, like getting dressed, self-grooming, and yes, even using the restroom. Their sensitivity to external stimuli is super extreme and can result in chaotic meltdowns that often cause self-injury. Their repetitive behaviors will be over the top and uncontrollable. I have the privilege of working with one such student. Lucas came to me as a middle schooler. He's a beautiful young man, and Lucas is big, really, really big, and really, really strong. He doesn't speak. He communicates using grunts and animalistic noises only. He rocks back and forth almost nonstop and refuses to wear socks and shoes and will rip his clothes off when he's uncomfortable. He shoves and hits with unbelievable strength, and he spits on everything. Windows, seats, into the air, and yep, even on me. If he's left unattended for even a hot second, he shoves everything in sight into his mouth and tries to eat it. A whole banana, peel and all, an entire ear of corn on the cob, including the husk, and even a fidget toy or a calming item. His meltdowns are heartbreaking and gut-wrenching to witness. He violently bangs his head on anything he can and frequently injures himself. His pain is obvious and even palatable, and nothing I try is even remotely successful in calming him. In frustration, and probably to ease my own anxiety as well, I just start singing children's songs to him one day. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Baa, Black Sheep, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Old MacDonald. But there's still no signal from him that he's even hearing what I'm singing to him. But then I started singing 10 Little Monkeys Jumping on the Bed. And I noticed that he was beginning to calm down. Not totally, but it was a giant step in the right direction. During a conversation with his mom later that day, I learned that the 10 Little Monkeys book was his favorite when he was young, and most likely the reason that this song soothes him. After this breakthrough, it dawned on me that this information needs to be shared with everyone who works with Lucas throughout his day. So I asked to be included in his CAPES conferences. As a result, I'm able to share calming techniques that we're successfully using on the bus, and the building staff is able to share what works for him in the building. I try the techniques that his teachers and peers suggest and find one in particular that works really well. All I have to do is apply gentle pressure to his head with both of my hands, and it calms him and appears to relieve his pain, at least somewhat. So to say that working with severe and profound autistic students is difficult, that's probably one of the biggest, baddest understatements of all time. It's challenging, frustrating, energy zapping, and downright mind-boggling. And on top of all of that, it requires all of the self-control, understanding, and compassion that you can muster up. But if you work hard to develop relationships with your students, their families, their teachers, counselors, and paras, and other educators, you will be better equipped to deal with any problems that may arise.
Students with autism need to be taught the way that they can learn. In the case of a student with profound autism or nonverbal, we have to look for clues from them, as Mickey said. Sometimes getting on the floor with them so we are at their level, slowly giving words to action, holding up a picture of a school bus and saying bus, rolling a ball to them and maybe even rolling it back to ourselves until they gain the knowledge of what it is that we want them to do. They must trust you and need your patience and your understanding. They don't always have words to tell you when something is wrong or that they need help. So we strive to interpret what they are communicating and respond appropriately. Believe and accept that their sensory experience is real when they tell you through words, actions, or otherwise that their clothes hurt or that a noise is too loud by putting their hands over their ears or a light too bright. It is. Maybe the student thinks you stink, and then you realize, oh my goodness, I used a new shampoo or put on a lotion with fragrance, and because the smell is different from what they are used to, they are expressing that to you. It may not make sense to you, and you may not understand, but just accept it and help them any way you can. Have a sense of humor. Don't get offended by the things that they might say. They don't need to look at you to hear you. Just because someone isn't making eye contact doesn't mean they aren't listening or they don't care. Dropping the expectation for eye contact is a simple thing that can make communication more comfortable. In fact, looking away and doodling or stimming may be how they calm their brain down so that they can pay attention to what you are saying. They can look at you or they can listen to you. When they are looking at you, they are seeing all the things about you, your actions, your face, how you move your eyes, your hair has a few strands out of place, your lips move, and so on. And remember, it can take up to 3 minutes for them to process a single auditory command. Asperger's syndrome is a part of the autism spectrum. It is a developmental disorder related to autism and characterized by awkwardness in social interaction. Unlike classic autism, they often do not have early delays in language development or evident cognitive delays. They do, however, have restrictive and repetitive behaviors, stims, like flapping their hands, freezing in place, and others, especially when they are excited or overwhelmed, and they do experience meltdowns. They often talk in a straight mechanical voice that sounds emotionless, simply because that's how they see the world, in a very straightforward way. Many learn to read early and easily and have advanced vocabulary, but might have significant challenges with comprehension and contextual understanding. My grandson Nate has Asperger's and was not formally diagnosed until he was 10. During his early school years, he met the academic targets on time. He loved math because math never lies, unlike, let's say, spelling. In math, 2 plus 2 always equals 4. However, in spelling, there are often multiple ways to spell a word, such as there, depending on the meaning. Because they are visual learners, do not do well with verbal communication, and are easily distracted by sounds and movement. Can you imagine the difficulty for the student with Asperger's when a teacher is walking around and saying the spelling words, expecting the student to write them down and spell them correctly? A student with autism learns and concentrates on what you are saying best when you stand still so that they can find your voice, to the side of them so they don't have to look at you, so they can concentrate on what it is that you are saying. Some with Asperger's have IQs in the superior or gifted range, like so many that are featured in movies or on TV. Many with Asperger's, however, have IQs in the normal range. However, due to their ability to focus and determination, they often reach higher levels when challenged. As an example, when my grandson got into high school, he ate lunch every day with students he had known since elementary school. Some were school sports stars and cheerleaders. When they got their first report cards, my grandson was the only one at the table who was not on the honor roll. When he saw me that afternoon, he was very upset about it, and he told me the next time he was going to be on the honor roll. He succeeded, and he stayed on the honor roll all the way through high school. Many students with Asperger's have issues with attention. Their senses are constantly being bombarded with input that they can't filter out. Their attention sometimes wanders when someone is speaking, as their minds have already moved past when what is being said, often in a different direction. Issues with attention and timing, clumsiness, and low muscle tone are often present, making social connections through play and sports very challenging. Organization and attention are often disordered, and most students with Asperger's syndrome experience ever-present anxiety. Extreme adherence to rules, routines, and favorite activities or topics often make transitions, changes, and flexibility, such as playing a game according to somebody else's rules, extremely difficult and distressing. Because they are visual learners, they learn rules and how to play a sport or a game better by seeing it being played than listening to you tell them what and how they should do it. Since the challenges vary considerably from those of classic autism, skill deficits with organization and attention, especially in an intellectually gifted child, are often misinterpreted as a lack of effort or interest, and the student is often penalized rather than taught the needed isolated skills. As students age and become aware of their differences, anxiety often increases and depression might develop. Bullying by others is very common as naive students without the self-advocacy skills that are needed, desperate for friendships, become victims. People with Asperger's find it challenging to connect with others, often having difficulty making eye contact, of course, reading other people's facial expressions or body language, or taking another person's perspective. While they develop language in a typical time frame and their vocabulary might be advanced, they have difficulty understanding the subtle aspects of communication, like reading gestures, understanding idioms, recognizing and expressing emotions, and flowing with the social back and forth of communication. Language is usually interpreted very literally. So idioms and sarcasms and jokes that we all use can be very confusing to them. Let me give you another little example. One day, my daughter-in-law came home from a hard day at work, being on her feet all day, and she sat down and said, "My feet are burning. They feel like they're on fire." My grandson walked over, looked down and said, "Nope, I don't see any flames." You don't need to do gymnastics looking for hidden meanings or abstract thoughts when you're in conversation with someone on the spectrum. Make sure you hear everything the person has to say before jumping into the conversation, and keep everything concrete. They have difficulty understanding vague directions. Be precise, specific, and direct when talking with them. Students with Asperger's are usually highly verbal and will often say things others have learned to keep to themselves, thereby appearing rude. Don't get offended. If a message comes out very direct, they often produce lengthy dissertations on favorite topics without the realization that the information is of no use to the person they are speaking to. How is autism diagnosis different from girls? It's often difficult to diagnose a girl with autism, as most of the diagnosis guidelines were developed around males with autism. Females tend to get diagnosed early only when they are low functioning or nonverbal. Autism and ADHD tend to co-occur, resulting in many females who are easily distracted being diagnosed with ADHD instead of autism, or due to one of the diagnostic triad being repetitive and restricted behavior, OCD can also look a lot like autism, which results in girls being diagnosed with OCD or ADHD instead of autism spectrum disorder. Students with autism love order, rules, structure, and sameness. Autism manifests differently in girls than in their male counterparts. Females with autism may be closer to neurotypically developing males in their social abilities than neurotypical girls or boys with autism. As an example, they might have had a meltdown at home before school, kicking and screaming because they don't want to go to school, and then run into the classroom and give the teacher a big hug, acting like they're so happy to be there, masking their real feelings. High-functioning girls tend to use social camouflage to mask their autism. They mimic behavior and become excellent actresses, often imitating other children in order to initiate social contact. They want to have friends, but are just not sure how to make those friends. They might be seen standing back in a crowd, appear very shy, have poor eye contact, and usually have only one friend at a time. Their lack of reciprocity in social play and their adherence to rules can sometimes be seen as controlling or domineering. They have intense focus and determination. Girls with autism usually exhibit less severe stems. They are more likely to swish their hair or pick at their clothes, twirl their hair, bite their fingernails, pinch their ear, or other stems which are much more closely related to neurotypical girls' behavior. Many are very creative, imaginative, and have obsessive interests and don't understand why others are not as engaged as they are. When they become overloaded, they may be very loud, laugh or excitedly talk louder than everybody around them, and exaggerate their behaviors, such as moving or dancing around, and their emotions and responses can seem over the top. But each time they mask their real feelings, it is very stressful for them and can build up to a meltdown, often once they are at home or away from others.
Learning styles is a concept that attempts to describe the methods by which people gain information. People learn visually, auditorily, and through hands-on activity. ASD students tend to think in pictures. Their thoughts are like videos playing in their minds. They have difficulty processing verbal instructions. For instance, if one of your students is running around the classroom like a banshee and not following repeated directions to sit down, the student's clearly having a difficult time in responding to voice commands. So you may need to focus on their strengths and show them a picture of a chair and gesture for them to sit down. Remember, students with autism, they're concrete thinkers, and they learn best when information is given to them in gradual chunks. They thrive on routines and may melt down when asked to deviate from their normal schedule. For every perceived downside to autism, there is an equally prevalent upside as well. Students on the autism spectrum notice things. They are very aware of their surroundings and pay close attention to sensory input. Many of them will see the beauty in things that others may miss, even though they pass by it every day. Think about how often we fail to notice the little things, like the changing colors of fall leaves, or the smell of a crisp autumn morning, or a breeze blowing through our hair, or the sun shining on our face. Autistics notice all of these things, and they take joy in them. Most all students with autism are very passionate about the things that interest them. They will devote all of their time and energy to learn every single thing about something that interests them. And they will stick to it even if they find it difficult, frustrating, or even uncool. Autistic students will rarely judge another individual. They don't care if you're skinny or carry around some extra pounds. if you're rich or you're poor, if your outfit is not quite up to par, or you drive a crappy car. Such social expectations are of no importance to them, and they tend to see through the surface impressions and look for the real person inside.
Structure and routine to a person with autism is like glasses for a person who has a visual impairment or a hearing aid for someone with a hearing impairment. It is important. The more organized and structured the environment and teaching style, the better. A daily schedule is one tool for structuring time. You may have a schedule such as we start with math every day, move to reading, then art, lunch, etc. But this is not enough for most students with autism. They are better served with a personal and interactive daily schedule, which is more detailed with times listed. They do well with clearly defined boundaries for specific areas of the classroom. Students' work areas should also be organized. Sometimes having a folder of work to do and work that's already done can be useful. Prepare the student for change in routine. Give them a time for how long until that transition will occur. Alert them, if possible, to a change, such as a fire drill, assembly, or other things. Know that the change, the noise, sights, crowded conditions may cause them extreme distress and meltdowns. They are almost always obsessed with time. If you ask my grandson, what time did you get up? He will say something like 5:47, not about 6 o'clock. It's always very specific. That means you can't say to the student something like, at about 10 o'clock, we're going to go to the computer lab, unless you mean exactly at 10. If you go at 9:58, you're too early, they're not prepared. And if you go at 10:02, trust me, they're going to tell you you are late, and they will let you know about it. Get their attention. Keep directions short and simple. One direction at a time. They have difficulty processing long streams of verbal input. If you string together directions such as get your math book out and turn to page 59, complete the first 10 problems, oh, and be sure and put your name on the top of the paper, they might have gotten the direction to take the math book out of the desk. They process visual information much better than oral language. When possible, accompany verbal content with visual representations. Be patient. I can't say that enough. Allow time for processing. Remember, I told you, it can take up to 3 minutes for them to process a single command. And each time you repeat it or you change the command, they start all over processing the command. I like to think of it as their brain as a computer that has a slow processing speed on the internet. You type a command into the search bar, and the little circle starts spinning around and around, or worse yet, their big blue bar starts moving across and then stalls out. You get frustrated, you hit the enter key, and all of a sudden, the blue bar goes all the way back to the beginning, and nothing happens. And then you repeat, and you change, and it keeps on going over and over till you are so frustrated that you're just ready to blow your mind. That's the kind of thing that happens when you repeat or change the command to a student with autism. Frustration begins to mount for them each time you repeat it. Repeat or rephrase a question or command only if needed for understanding. Tell the student exactly what you want them to do instead of what not to do. Let me tell you a little funny story a teacher told me. There was a teacher who was having students go to the whiteboard and solve double-digit addition problems. When the student with autism went to the board, he stood there and hesitated before beginning. The teacher, thinking he was having difficulty beginning to solve the problem, said, "Remember, write column first." The student began writing, and the teacher's thinking, what in the world is he writing? The student did just exactly what the teacher said, and he wrote the word column, which also happened to be his first name. Provide simple choices, yes or no, this one or that one. We all have those disapproving mom or teacher looks when the class or the bus or the cafeteria is too loud. The students with ASD will likely not understand your look, what that your look means to quiet down or to change their behavior. While the other students will quickly realize what that look means, the student with autism will continue the behavior and wonder, now why is he in trouble? You will need to be direct in telling the student exactly what you want him to do. Joey, stop talking, or Joey, sit down. Most autistic students must be taught that 93% of communication is nonverbal. Facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, context. Most do not understand sarcasm, idioms, or slang phrases, as I said before. Here's another example of something that we might say just out of norm. One day it started raining, and it just started pouring down. My son made the statement, "Geez, it's raining cats and dogs out there." My grandson ran over to the window, looked out, and said, "Nope. It's just water, Dad." Think of all the slang phrases or sarcasms we use in our daily life. When pigs don't fly, etc., that they don't understand. Students with ASD sometimes ask if a statement is true or not because they can't discern that. Many students are tired. Of course they are. Several of them most likely have sleep disorders. They can't settle down until late into the night. It's no wonder that they can be very groggy in the morning. Also, remember, it takes a great amount of work and energy to communicate and to deal with other people and all the input from their senses at full volume into their brain.
Communication consists of the words we use, eye contact, facial expressions, hand gestures, body language, and other nonverbals. Difficulties in these areas have always been considered a core feature of autism. Some students with autism don't talk at all. Others will talk in a stilted, robotic tone or in an exaggerated sing-song. Communication between people with and without autism is a two-way problem. Autistic individuals have difficulty in understanding instructions, may take longer to respond, and have a hard time telling us what is troubling them or what they need. We as educators can always do more to meet them more than halfway by knowing and accepting differences in the ways in which they express themselves. Donna talked to you about eye contact. And is eye contact really required for understanding the spoken word? I'm sure some of you feel it's helpful, but in reality, it's less important than a lot of us think. For instance, think about a blind person engaged in conversation. They are unable to make eye contact, but they get the meaning of what was said very well. Don't expect a student with ASD to make or keep eye contact with you during conversations. Many cannot look at you in the eye and concentrate on what you are saying at the same time. It's got to be one way or the other, but can't be both. When they look at you as you are talking, their focus shifts from what you're saying to what's going on with your face. Like, wow, her glasses are really dirty, or she's got something stuck in her teeth, and what's that thing in her hair? However, if they look away, the chances are much higher that they're processing your spoken words. One of my aides happens to be the same young man that Donna's been telling you about, her grandson Nate. As you already know, Nate has Asperger's. What you don't know, though, is he is the best aide I have ever had the honor of working with. His work ethic is superb, and his ability to relate to our students is nothing short of amazing. He's an expert on trains, school buses, the weather, and NASCAR. Many times when we're on a short break, he'll give me a long, and I do mean long, dissertation on one of these subjects. Mondays are particularly amusing and predictable because he's watched a NASCAR race over the weekend, and he gives me a blow-by-blow account of all the crashes and the placings. He knows the drivers, what kind of cars they drive, who their sponsors are, what team they're on, who's in their pit crew, and all of the related statistics. He will tell me this information and not even notice that I'm not the least bit interested in NASCAR or that I'm not paying attention to what he's saying. All the information he has learned about NASCAR, it just pours out of him like water from a well. And when the well has run dry, he will just stop talking and look out the window. One of the hallmarks of autism is a perceived lack of interest in social interaction. I say perceived lack of interest because most individuals on the spectrum really do want to interact with others, but they just don't have the tools to do so. An autistic child many times will have a difficult time noticing and interpreting the social world. It's extremely difficult for them to read social cues such as tone of voice, body language, or facial expressions. And many may not respond appropriately. But how could they when they never understood what was said in the first place?
Autistic students do have empathy, lots of it. They know they have feelings. They just don't always have the ability to read your feelings. You say your beloved pet died, and they may tell you a funny story to make you laugh because you are sad, not because they are cold and rough and heartless. They may not know how to respond to what they see or feel. They lack cognitive empathy, which is the ability to predict or read others' thoughts, feelings, and intentions, including the ability to read between the lines during communication. They usually can't read your face and know what you are feeling. They do have affective empathy, which is the ability to share another person's feelings with them if explicitly told about the feeling. And they have compassionate empathy, which is the desire to help others, though they may not always know what to do or how to help. Don't chastise or humiliate them for responding in ways that you or others feel are inappropriate. If there's a clear gap in the child's understanding of a situation or feeling, it means now we know what we need to teach. It's important to create social emotional development IEP goals that can teach autistic students what to do in life situations, even down to the simple things like receiving a gift. Jimmy, I love this screen. This is one of my favorites. How many of us have done similar things like this in life? Dimming is like turning down the radio when you think you smell something burning. It's a way of turning off the other senses so you can make sure nothing's burning. Almost everyone engages in some sort of self-stimulating behavior. You might bite your fingernails, crack your knuckles, drum your fingers, jiggle your foot, or whistle when you're bored, nervous, or need to relieve tension. Sometimes it becomes a habit, and you're not even aware that you are doing it. But for most people, it's a harmless behavior, and you recognize when and where it's appropriate. Stimming in a person with autism is more obvious and can go on for long periods of time, unaware that the behavior might be disruptive or even harmful to other people.
The word stim is short for self-stimulation, and as Donna said, everyone has a stim, and that's referred to as typical stimming. However, if the self-stimulation interferes with everyday activities and prevents learning, then it's referred to as autistic self-stimulation. Autistic stimming consists of repetitive movements, including all of the things listed on the slide here, and it's a form of communication. When our students are engaged in self-stimulation, it simply means they're trying to tell us that something is affecting them. When one or more stims occur, our students are attempting to block out excessive sensory input, reduce pain, manage their emotions, or self-regulate. So we would be wise to heed their warnings and initiate their calming plan. Repetitive behavior is a common trait of autism and is generally a tool used for self-calming. Every student will be unique in their repetitive behaviors, interests, or activities. For some, it could be saying the same thing over and over or asking the same questions many times in a row. For others, it can be movements like rocking, pacing, twirling, or flapping of the hands. Or it could be any combination of all of these. Autistic students may not use items in the manner intended, like, say, Matchbox cars, for instance. An autistic student may spend hours lining them up rather than pushing them around on the floor going vroom, vroom, or watching them speed through a racetrack.
Be patient with the repeated questions and topics and behaviors that your students use to converse with you. Even though you would like to use earplugs sometimes or just ignore them, to the students, those activities may be very calming. It can also mean that they want or need your attention. If you know that the behavior will need to stop, advanced warning will make a smooth transition more likely. Be specific. Make sure you provide specific praise and/or rules and rewards for following the rules or using good behavior. Use their name. Thank them for doing what it is that you wanted them to do. Like, John, thank you for sitting down. Great job. To a student with autism, a rule is a rule is a rule. Always the same for everyone. If you are having some challenges, communicate with other school personnel involved with the student and the parents to see what techniques they use, like Mickey told you about in the beginning, to help with the behaviors. We're all in this together, and we can all help each other. Meltdowns are a real concern, and they can happen anytime, any place. Everyone at some point in their life has thrown a temper tantrum or a hissy fit, as I like to call them, over something we didn't get or a situation that didn't quite go the way we wanted it to, or you lost your temper. A meltdown, on the other hand, is involuntary and cannot be controlled. It is a systemic breakdown that throws your whole world upside down. You feel powerless to stop it. A meltdown can be very quick, only a few minutes, or it can last for hours at a time. It's very unpredictable. The person having the meltdown may be unable to process emotions, thoughts, and sometimes can't even control their own motor functions. Meltdowns can be very quiet. The person can totally withdraw, or it can be very loud. In fact, it can be quite dangerous. Arms flail, bodies can be thrown to the ground, and if someone isn't there who understands what's going on and how to deal with it, the person having the meltdown could get hurt or hurt others. It is vital to maintain the safety of the person having the meltdown rather than trying to stop it. Afterwards, the feeling of a total loss of control can leave the child feeling exhausted. A meltdown requires a lot of physical and mental energy. Trying to make sense of what happened and gather themselves and their thoughts after such an episode can be quite daunting, and the child will need as much reassurance as possible. You can imagine that it's not a pleasant experience recovering from a meltdown, especially when it happens in public. A student with autism related this about what it feels like to have a meltdown. It literally feels like my head is imploding. Building up to it gets overwhelming. But an actual meltdown, it's just like your brain is ceasing to exist. Of course it doesn't, but I lose control of my muscles and my ability to talk. I can't modulate my voice or really send any signals from my brain to my body to calm down. It's as though my brain, as a last-minute thing, sends a bunch of energy to the rest of my body, but there's no instructions on how that energy should be used. So it goes all over, and I'm totally out of control. I feel all sorts of emotions all at once, and I want to run away from them all. I lose sight of what is socially appropriate and start to say things I either don't mean or something I've wanted to say deep down for a long time. Whenever that happens, I end up hurting someone or confusing everyone. Telling me to calm down doesn't help. Afterwards, it leaves me completely washed and burnt out, very tired from head to toe, inside and out, unable to talk or sometimes even move. It can be a total shutdown where I can't speak to verbalize what I'm thinking, which can be several things at once. I need time and a quiet space to come around, away from people, where I can engage in my own favorite repetitive activity. As I got older, I started to recognize on my own when I was beginning to have a meltdown. This takes a lot of self-awareness, which came with maturity for me. At this point, it helped to have a code word or a phrase to say to others when I needed a break to prevent it. Just make sure the people who need to know about it are aware. Eventually, my parents and even close friends were able to figure out when I needed a break without me even saying a word. If they do happen to have a meltdown, the most important thing we can do to help is be patient. Understand they are not trying to be difficult. Once they've learned to use their coping skills, allow them the time and space to use them. And once calmed down, then work on solving whatever issue caused the meltdown in the first place.
Many times, tantrums and meltdowns will appear to be the same. There's going to be a lot of the same actions going on during both, like screaming and shouting, stomping and kicking, and possibly a little bit of swearing and biting thrown into the mix. But in reality, their causes are very different, as are their end results. A temper tantrum is just a strategy to try and get what he or she wants. We've all seen that child in the grocery store crying, kicking, screaming in response to being told they can't have or do something they want. Could be a toy, some candy in the checkout lane, or just to get out of the cart. Most of the time, the child will check to make sure that you're aware of what they're doing. And if you give in to their demands, the tantrum will be over as quickly as it started. A meltdown, on the other hand, will physically look like a tantrum, but internally it's a whole different ballgame. It's the result of some sort of sensory input that is overwhelming to the autistic child. Imagine a child with, let's say, hypersensitivity to noise and smell that goes into a grocery store. All of the noises are at the same loud level, and the smells are all equally strong. There are a lot of people talking, the music is playing over the loudspeaker, the cash registers are beeping and spitting out receipts, the carts are squeaking as they roll up and down the aisles. Some lady just knocked down a display of baked beans, sending it crashing to the floor. The deli is handing out samples of stinky cheese, and a guy just rolled by that obviously hasn't showered in quite a while. An employee's cleaning up a spill, using bleach, and the smell of someone's overpowering cologne is lingering in the air. The autistic child quickly covers his ears with his hands and begins to rock back and forth. This is the beginning of the meltdown. The mom attempts to calm the child, but it's already too late. The child has become so emotionally overwhelmed that he cannot hold it together anymore. He begins to scream and kick and continues to lose all control. He doesn't know what he wants or needs at this point. There is no goal or desired outcome here. The behavior will stop only when the child has calmed down and regains control through compassionate support. For the child who threw the tantrum, recovery is pretty simple. They succeeded in getting what they wanted and will proceed happily as if nothing happened. The child who melted down, however, is going to need to reestablish therapeutic rapport. They need to understand and they need to be reassured that they are still loved despite the meltdown, and that you are there to help them through it.
Students with autism may have difficulty with sound, smells, taste, touch, as Mickey so eloquently put it, and movement occurring around them. They are bothered more than others from certain input from their environment. Believe and accept that their sensory experience is real. And when they tell you through words, actions, or otherwise, something like their clothes hurt, the noise is too loud, the light's too bright, someone touched me, it stinks, a certain food makes me gag, or they can't chew it, a texture that's too rough or soft, a tag in my clothes is scratching my neck. I'm scared, too many people, because to them it is. And they can be very painful for them. It may not make sense to you, and you may not understand, but just accept it and help them in any way you can. Each student may have different sensory issues. To help with sound, maybe use earphones or earplugs. For lights that are too bright or bothersome, how about sunglasses, a hat, or a hoodie slipped up over the head and down on the forehead to block out the light? Sometimes, when you're sitting at home, put a hat or a visor on yourself and just experience how much light and activity around you is blocked out. And yet, when an autistic student walks in our classroom with a hat on his head, what's the first thing we tell him? Take the hat off. When you go out somewhere and you see a child with a hat or a hoodie pulled up and earphones in his ears, be understanding and understand that they may be trying hard to filter out the noise and the lights, very painful to one with autism, and prevent a meltdown. Fidget toys and concentrated breathing exercises or music can also be used for calming.
Ben Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And this holds true with meltdowns caused by sensory issues. The name of the game with sensory overload is prevention and preparation. As you begin to develop those all-important relationships with your students, you will learn how to make the necessary adjustments to their environment to reduce the impact of sensory issues. One of them may need to be seated away from other students. If you have a runner, you may need to prevent access to the door. If you have a student who is hypersensitive to light, you may need to consider softer lighting or allow those hats and sunglasses that Donna just talked to you about. A lot of autistic children will respond positively to music, but in order to use music as a calming technique, we need to be very aware of each child's volume tolerance and make necessary adjustments so all can listen comfortably. When all else fails, it's a great idea to have a box filled with calming items. Sensory bottles, stress balls, fidget items, a weighted lap pet, basically anything that can distract them from their discomfort and redirect their focus to more enjoyable things.
People on the spectrum seem to learn best when using a combination of visual supports along with auditory input. Seeing it helps the person to retain and process information and gives them something to refer back to as a reminder. Visual supports can be used to communicate. They are adaptable, portable, and can be used in most situations. Visual supports can help to provide structure and routine, encourage independence, build confidence, improve understanding, avoid frustration and anxiety, and provide opportunities to interact with others. They can make communication physical and consistent rather than fleeting and inconsistent like spoken words can be. Students on the spectrum can benefit from a daily personal schedule with built-in visuals. Visual supports can also be used in a wide range of ways, such as a single message. The person takes a yellow card from their pocket when they need to go to the bathroom, or puts a purple card on the board when they're feeling stressed. Sometimes students just need a quiet place to retreat. There should be a place, not a place for punishment, where a student can go and take a break from the world. You can set up a spot, maybe in the back of the room, for a getaway moment. But make sure that you make rules, such as you can be there for 5 minutes and use a sand or a water bead timer. Make the rule that after you take the break, you need to finish whatever it was that you were working on. So there is a completion of the time that you spent in the back. Processing multi-step directions is very difficult for students with autism who have a hard time with oral language or written instruction. Using visuals to break down a task or behavior can be a great way to help a student learn and master steps in a sequence. Visual supports are used with children who have autism for two main purposes. They help us communicate better with the student, and they help the student communicate better with others.
Visual supports can be photographs, drawings, objects, and written words. And they're also a great way to build routines and inform our students about our expectations for the school day. Since visual supports incorporate words with pictures, they help with comprehension and recognition of words as well. Remember when Donna talked to you about the computer going back to the very beginning every time the button was pushed? This is where a visual depicting step-by-step instructions would be extremely beneficial to the student. They can keep the card in front of them and refer to it back as many times as necessary, rather than struggle with the processing of verbal instructions. Just think about the possibilities that this opens up. You could create a visual support that are specific to each student's needs, such as a visual schedule so the student knows exactly what his day looks like, one that displays desired behaviors, one that is for waiting and how to take turns, one for the cafeteria procedure, and maybe one for the bus. This is a visual support that I use often with my students when they need to calm themselves. Closing their eyes, counting to 5, or taking deep breaths using the Take 5 technique. I'm going to try to walk y'all through this one right now. So if you would, hold up your left hand. Use your right index finger to travel along the outside of your thumb. As you do that, you're going to slowly breathe in. And then you're going to run your finger down to the valley and let out a long exhale. Then you're going to start up the next finger, breathe in, down the finger, slow exhale. Next finger, breathe in, breathe out. Ring finger in, out. Pinky, breathe in, breathe out. How are you feeling? Calm and relaxed, I hope. Others may need to take a break or walk away. They can also ask for help or to do a sensory activity. Since all of our students are unique, you're going to need to individualize the visual support for each one of them. But the good news is they're super easy to individualize and super inexpensive to make. So this slide is going to talk to you about the 10 things every child with autism wants you to know, okay? Autism does not define the whole child. Rather, it's just one of their many characteristics. For instance, when I first meet you, I may notice that you're tall or short, wear glasses or not, have an athletic build, or appear a bit nerdy. Or you could even, I would notice you speak with a regional accent. But that doesn't mean that that's what you're all about. There's a whole lot more substance to you than just your physical appearance or the way you speak. And it's the same with children on the autism spectrum. They need us to understand that their autism is just one aspect of who they are. Hypersensitivity is probably the most difficult aspect of ASD to understand. Ordinary sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches that we may not even notice can be painful for our students with ASD. Number 3, this is where it's vitally important to acknowledge the difference between won't and can't. Expressive language can be a major challenge for ASD children. It isn't that they don't want to listen to instructions, it's that they don't understand what's being asked of them. We as educators must speak in plain words and allow plenty of time for processing. Autistic children naturally tend to like repetitive actions and routines to create order in their lives, which provides them with a safe and secure environment. Routines lessen the stress of the unknown and adds to their learning potential. No stress makes it much easier for them to learn new things, new habits, and new skills. So if you focus on building relationships with each one of your students, You'll find that each and every one of them is very unique and special in their own way. Most children with autism will have trouble developing language skills. Many will say things that make no sense or don't relate to the conversation they're having, like a student who repeatedly counts from 1 to 5 even though the conversation has nothing to do with numbers. This can be quite a guessing game at times, but once again, if you've developed that strong relationship with the students, chances are you're going to be able to figure out what they need. Patience and consistency are golden when you're working with autistic students. The more you demonstrate what you want the student to learn, the easier it becomes for them. Always focus on the positives. Don't dwell on those negatives. Know and understand that ASD students really do want to be social with others, but it just doesn't come naturally for them. And the last one, I really love this because when it comes right down to it, unconditional love will conquer all, and our students are so worth it.
Let me leave you tonight with this story that was written by a person with autism about what it feels like to navigate the world with autism. Imagine you are a member of a lost race whose spaceship somehow managed to crash land on a foreign planet. You find a strange, unseen beauty in your surroundings, but are taken by surprise by the people you encounter. They look just like your people, only they act differently. Their language is the same as yours, but they speak it in a way that is nearly incoherent to you. They expect you to understand, cherish, and honor their customs and traditions, but you simply do not understand the purpose. They often demand things from you, but you are unsure of how such demands are to be satisfied, as you cannot comprehend their words. This so-called defiance is often taken not well by these aliens. They wish for you to blend in with them, to use the odd word combinations they use, to move the way they do, and they even try to make you wear the tight, scratchy, and impractical garments with which they adorn themselves. You just want to go home. Living in this world takes far too much effort, and their attempts at assimilation are unsuccessful. The people believe you are unintelligent, but you know that's not the case. You are intelligent and sane, just not by their logical standards. Then you find it, whether it's a hobby, sport, book, film, show, or a band. You find it. You fall in love with it immediately and immerse yourself in it. For such a simple thing, it gives you meaning. With this valuable thing, you do not need to understand the world around you. All you need is it, and you are complete. It is your way of reaching out in the hope someone will see your worth. The scenario I just read likely seems to be like a science fiction piece, something meant to confuse rather than to relate to. However, this analogy is the most accurate way that this student could describe his experiences as an autistic person. Things to remember. Remember first that they are children. They are your students. And then that they have autism. Love them for who they are, and remember that we are all in this together. So collaborate with the family, other school staff associated with the student, and the student themselves. Mickey and I have enjoyed our time with you tonight. Thank you for joining us in understanding students with autism. We hope it will help you to interact better with your students and to share your calm in what sometimes can seem like a world of chaos. We have our email addresses on the final screen if you need to contact us. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mickey and Donna. We've now reached the Q&A portion of tonight's webinar, and we've received a few questions that we would like to share with you, the presenters. So the first question is, please repeat the affective empathy traits. I think that was you, Donna.
Yes, they do have affective empathy, which is the ability to share another person's feelings with them if explicitly told about the feeling. In other words, what is it that you are feeling? Are you feeling very, very sad? Are you feeling very, very happy? And they, oh, I'm sorry, that's the one you wanted. Thank you.
Thanks. So the next question is stimming similar to perseveration? And I just want to give you a quick definition of perseveration, which is continuing to respond to a stimulus even after the stimulus is gone, like the student can't get something off their mind. So, Nikki?
Yeah, Lisa, to me, perseveration is when someone's stuck on a behavior and uses that behavior past its useful stage. So basically, stimming is a repetition of physical movement, sounds, words, or moving objects. So they basically mean the same thing. Stim or stimming is kind of like slang for perseveration.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, my student's stimming is spitting. Any ideas on what to do to stop it when it becomes defiance?
Well, spitting, first of all, we need to realize that there's different sensory needs. There can be tactile, visual, body stimulation, spinning, smelling of things, and oral. Often, the oral part of it is one of the most overlooked sensory input needs. So you're saying your student is defiant about it, and I would just have to make sure that it is indeed defiant and not a sensory need. So for a student who spits for the fun of it, they've discovered a new way to meet their sensory need. And you remember me talking about Lucas. With Lucas, the reason he spit it was because he enjoyed watching the water run down on whatever he had spit on. So with Lucas, I found that it was helpful to use a spray bottle filled with water. And when he began to spit, I could put the bottle in his hand and spray it on the window, and he would trace his fingers through it. So to really get to the heart of the question, I guess what I would look for is another way to help that student get the oral sensory input that they're looking for, or try a replacement behavior for it, like maybe sipping water through a straw or something like that.
Great. Thank you, Mickey. The next question is, do we give the student their space during a meltdown, or do we jump in and try to talk to the student?
You really need to give the students their space. If you're talking to them, think about what a meltdown is. A meltdown is that they are already overwhelmed with sensory issues, okay, or emotions. And so now you're standing there and you're talking to them. They're not hearing you because they've already, as the one student said, it's as if his brain just shuts down and he doesn't know what to do with all the energy. And so if you continue to talk to him, it's just like more and more and more input, and he's not hearing you anyway. You're better off to help to get them to a quiet spot. Let them come down.
How do you do the 5-finger exercise with a nonverbal student?
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to remember that nonverbal does not mean non-hearing. So you're just basically going to demonstrate. Hold your hand up and run through the motions with them. And you demonstrate the breathing in and the long exhale. Also, this is where...
How do you do the 5-finger exercise with a nonverbal student?
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to remember that nonverbal does not mean non-hearing. So you're just basically going to demonstrate. Hold your hand up and run through the motions with them. And you demonstrate the breathing in and the long exhale. Also, this is where visual support would be really helpful as well.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions that we have for tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are now at the conclusion of our webinar this evening. On behalf of the ESP Quality Department, we would like to take the opportunity to thank you for participating with us and to thank our presenters, Donna and Mickey, for this wonderful information. It was very informative. Please be sure to visit www.nea.org/ESPPD to stay up to date with both recorded and upcoming webinar sessions. We look forward to connecting with you in future webinars. Thank you and have a good evening.